Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Celtic Way morning briefing. It's Wednesday, the 27th of August. It is the morning after the night before Celtic are out of the Champions League after falling to FC Kairat after a penalty shootout. The decisive spot kicks were missed by Adam Ida, Luke McCown, and finally Daisen Maeda, and it is the Kazakhstani team that make it through to the league phase. The first Kazakhstani team to make the league phase since obviously the change of the competition, and the second all in all after Astana in 2015. My name is Ryan McGinley. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you everybody for joining us last night. We really appreciate the huge numbers that we had. I think there was a lot of angry people after the game last night, and they wanted to vent it, and a lot of them did that in the comment section, which you're welcome to do so. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Josh McCarthy. Josh, how are you doing? What did you make of last night? How do you feel?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well, Ryan. Thanks very much. In terms of the game last night, it's pretty poor, wasn't it? The manager said it after the game, it wasn't a Champions League level game, and I think you could tell that from the first 25 minutes onwards. It was very poor, very stodgy, no real decent phases of play, to be honest, from either team. And if you looked at that game in isolation, in the level of the two teams, you would probably argue that none of them deserve to play in the Champions League proper this season. In terms of Celtic, there are just so many issues and problems to unpack. I think we could probably do a 2-hour podcast here, and we'd still fill it with a lot of things that we could talk about in isolation. In terms of the game itself, Celtic did nowhere near enough to win the game. Brendan Rodgers said before it that there are no excuses, and that sentiment is still true after the game regardless. There are no excuses not to win that last night. I think one of the most frustrating points is that they did create some chances, just weren't clinical enough in front of goal. James Forrest has the header. Daisen Maeda runs through on goal. It's another one-on-one he's missed. It's a massive concern. His penalty was also very poor. And then you had the Rio Hatate chance, had a couple of others here and there. And then the penalty shootout itself, for me, it's just a big frustration that you go to Aberdeen in a cup final and you miss 2 penalties, and 3 months down the line, you miss 2 penalties against Aberdeen, you miss 3 penalties 3 months down the line in a shootout. It's just not ideal. In terms of the blame for this big defeat, I mean, the board and the hierarchy at the club now have overseen 5 consecutive failed Champions League qualification campaigns with 3 different managers. There's a common denominator there, and we all know who it is. But I think Brendan Rodgers does have to take some of the blame for the game last night. As much as he has an understrength team, he's not been backed fully this summer. We all know that. Not spent a lot of money in the team, but he does still have a lot of quality players on the park last night. You know, the likes of your Kieran Tierney's, Cameron Carter-Vickers played the game, Kasper Schmeichel in goal. The midfield 3 I felt was pretty strong. You had Daisen Maeda at the top end of the park too. So it's another big game in which Celtic haven't turned up. I feel like there have been a lot of those in recent times. A lot of derbies failed to turn up. The cup final failed to turn up, and yeah, it's another one last night. So I think the manager does need to take some of the blame, but I don't think he is the biggest perpetrator in all of this. I think it's certainly the hierarchy of the club that are up there. In terms of some of the players as well, though, you are asking for a bit more from them in terms of their performance as a whole. I mean, you wouldn't maybe think Champions League qualification was on the line with some of the desire some of them showed. And it says a lot for me that 2 academy youngsters, Colby Donovan and Dane Murray, were 2 perhaps Celtic's best players on the pitch. So yeah, that's my mini rant over for the first 4 minutes of the show.
Don't worry, I'll give you more of a chance to talk about the performance last night and what this means for Celtic as a whole this season. Of course, Celtic will now ply their trade in the Europa League for the first time in four years since Ange Postecoglou was at the club in his first season. I know they then dropped down to the Conference League, but it'll be the Europa League that Celtic play in. The draw for that is on Friday. It's not on Thursday, which was the Champions League draw. I think everybody was kind of looking forward to that on Thursday evening, but unfortunately it won't be Celtic that are in it. And it remains to be seen if there's going to be any Scottish representation in that competition. I don't think there will be, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, it's the performance last night. It was so turgid and really, really difficult to watch in some moments. I was mentioning it last night on the post-match. I know I'm the host today, but I'll still give my opinion on certain things. It was just so turgid. There was a lack of style, a lack of invigoration, particularly in the midfield. I don't know about you, Josh, but in my opinion, the midfield was the most concerning area. Now, I know that Dyson Maeda played for the middle. He skied a big chance that he should be at least, maybe not scoring from, but at least hitting the target. I think it was a more difficult chance than what people were saying, given the fact that the defender had tracked back and managed to pressurise him just a little bit. I'm not giving him any excuses, but he should be working the goalkeeper if he's one-on-one, or more or less one-on-one with the goalkeeper. But the midfield last night, Callum McGregor was completely nullified. Hatate was anonymous, and Nigrin was quite a frustrating player to watch last night. He grew into the game as the game wore on, had a couple of chances in extra time, but his contribution for the first sort of 90, 100 minutes were fouls in needless areas and bad deliveries into the box.
Yeah, I think Callum McGregor's performance was a big concern. I think uncharacteristically gave the ball away a number of times. He had that poor pass back to Kasper Schmeichel that Kasper Schmeichel didn't really judge well, and then it leads to an indirect free kick that could have panned out differently. And like you say, I think Nigrin, frustrating. I would agree with you in that sense. They did, like you say, grow into the game as it went on, but on the whole, just like a number of players out on the pitch. I mean, you could pick out several players who were frustrating to watch last night. I mean, Yang Hyun Jun is certainly one. Dyson Maeda missing his opportunity. James Forrest did next to nothing in the game except the header. Kieran Tierney didn't have his best display either, if I'm being brutally honest as well. Cameron Carter-Vickers looked even a wee bit shaky at times. So there were just
there was one moment where he completely lost the ball, and it was just a really concerning moment.
There's no real good performances on the pitch, and even the guys that come on, I mean, Adam Ida misses a penalty, but I thought when he initially came on, it did make somewhat of a difference. Celtic were feeding the ball into him, a couple of flicks, did pretty well. Engels was putting himself about, his deliveries were poor, but not too bad. Then Colby Donovan does well at right back. So it's mainly the subs who actually injected something into the game for Celtic. And at the second half of extra time, they were really pushing for the goal. And I think if play went on for another 15 minutes, Celtic might have got that goal because they were the ones pressurising. Kairat was certainly holding out for penalties. But on the whole, you should be going to... I'm not bothered about the excuses of a Scottish team has never won in Kazakhstan and all this. Brendan Rodgers said that there's no excuses to go there and win last night, and Celtic weren't able to do it. Kairat are positioned, I think it's 311th in the UEFA coefficient rankings, if I'm not mistaken there, and it's the lowest ranked team any Scottish side has played in Europe this campaign, so Celtic should be beating them over two legs. They missed a big opportunity at Celtic Park to go over there with an advantage, and I don't think that's maybe getting spoken about enough, the performance last week as well, in terms of if you go over there with a 1-goal lead, even last night, you'd have probably been able to be fine and hold up and get through, but it's just a big, massive frustration on the whole.
Yeah, I want to quickly touch on those positives that you spoke about, and there's not many, and I'm not going to go overboard on the positives because Celtic are out of the Champions League. They're having to play in the Europa League this season. But you're a person that really keeps a keen eye on the youth players and the academy players coming through. It was a chance for Dane Murray and Colby Donovan to ply their trade in Europe's top competition, or at least the qualifying stages for the top competition. And like you, I'll let you have your say in a wee second. I thought they did really well on the night. Dane Murray looked composed, and Colby Donovan, he had that chance in extra time that he passed to Nigrin, and Nigrin probably should have done better with the opportunity, but it was good play from him. But at least that's one positive in a night full of negatives for Celtic, that those youth players, those academy players, like some of them aren't youth players because Dane Murray's 22 now, but those academy projects or academy graduates rather stood up and actually tried to make the team better.
Yeah, definitely. I think they showed a bit of urgency in the performance that perhaps a lot of other players didn't show, and a bit more desire. And to be fair to Colby Donovan, it's only his second ever senior game in football, and he comes on in a massive game. The tension is high, the nerves would have been there, and he comes on and he shows great composure to pick out Benjamin Nigrin, who could have basically passed to set up maybe Luke McCowan, who could have had a better shot at goal, better attempt at goal. And like I said, I thought Dane Murray did really well when he came on as well. Won his headers, played the ball out, composed at the back. The manager has no qualms throwing Dane Murray in. I think the manager would have no qualms throwing Dane Murray in at Ibrox on Sunday. But yeah, you don't want to mask over everything else that's wrong at Celtic at the minute in terms of the strategy, in terms of the transfers, everything else. The two boys were really good. I'd like to see them get more opportunities perhaps in the Europa League, depending on some of the teams who Celtic could play. I'd maybe like to see Kobe Donovan and Dane Murray play a lot more. Donovan will likely be here now because I don't think Celtic are going out and sign a right back now. They've not qualified for the Champions League, so he'll be the backup for the foreseeable. I wonder if he could get a decent chunk of minutes at Ibrox, maybe with Ralston's situation.
Potentially, he could be the player that rotates on the Sundays after Ralston plays on the Thursdays, at least for the first few games in the Europa League. That's going to be a quick turnaround. Of course, Celtic will now be playing on Thursday nights due to their participation in the Europa League. Still getting used to that, to be honest with you. Not that it was entirely surprising given the performance last night, but I think we all had one eye on the Champions League, and unfortunately that's not where Celtic will be playing this season, and it's where they'll need to work towards next season, which will come in the form of more qualifiers. I think we'll go on and talk about Brendan Rodgers' comments, because after the game he made a couple of comments that I think maybe raised quite a few eyebrows to people that were tuning in later on, or went onto the website to check out his Q&A. So he was asked after the game in Almaty in Kazakhstan, what do you put this down to tonight? Is it just a one-off, or is this for a lack of investment earlier in the summer to try and bolster your squad? So the real questions came thick and fast for Brendan Rodgers, as you would expect, given the magnitude of this, or the importance of this defeat, rather. He said, listen, I'm concentrating at this moment in time on the game. It was a poor game, I felt. That's just a shame, because last year we made some great strides. I've said before, we had a hint of what we could do at the level, and with the greatest respect, this was a great opportunity for us to be back there, but sadly we won't be. So plenty of endeavour, plenty of honesty, but the Champions League is a wee bit more than that. It's usually disappointing, and I really feel for the supporters that travelled all the way to be here, the effort and commitment that they've shown to be here. We're bitterly disappointed for them as well as ourselves, because the Champions League is a wonderful competition, and we've seen that last year, we've seen the progress. But yeah, we would just have to, as we always have to, stick together as a squad and as a team and reflect on this, and we've got a huge game at the weekend. So yeah, it's a tough one to take. We didn't do enough over the two games. He then went on to talk about transfer investment, and he said, I always think that investment is great, but it has to be a timely investment. Investment in whatever it is you're doing has to be all at the right time. I think at this moment in time, it's like you say, it's a little bit raw. We've just lost the game, and like I say, this group of players have given everything. We're obviously limited to what we could do in the game in moments, but like I said, they give everything. We just couldn't find enough good moments of quality to break through. We have to accept that. I'll go on and speak about those other comments in a wee second, Josh, but he's saying what we're all thinking, isn't he? That, you know, those signings, the signings have to be meaningful, and I think for Celtic on the whole this summer, they weren't meaningful when it comes to the Champions League qualifiers. Their record signing, or their top signing this summer in terms of fee, was Shin Yamada, and he didn't even come off the bench last night. So what are your thoughts on Brendan Rodgers' comments?
Yeah, I think the timely investment comment is certainly one that everyone that follows Celtic, that knows a lot about Celtic would agree with, because it's certainly true. If you don't invest at the right time, you end up with a result like last night, and that's exactly what happened. You know, it's all well and good Celtic going out and signing 3 or 4 players between now and next Monday's transfer deadline. It can't affect last night's result and whether we qualify for the Champions League. It can't. And if you, it's the simple line. It's a line that goes about all the time. If you fail to prepare to fail, and that couldn't be truer than last night. You know, if you don't sign the players that you think can help you qualify for the Champions League, you're not going to qualify for the Champions League. And a lot of the players on the park last night, and the manager talked about it as well in those comments, you need honesty and endeavour's enough, but you need that extra quality. Some players on that park last night didn't have that extra quality that makes you qualify for the Champions League. I think one of the worst parts of it as well, and the whole thing, is that some people that see from about 25 minutes in last night, half an hour in last night, you could somewhat see the result coming, couldn't you? In terms of the way the game was going, it had all the hallmarks of it, and that for me is one of the worst parts of it. That you had no real confidence in anyone that was coming onto the pitch, or no real confidence in people that were maybe even on the pitch. The manager spoke at the end of last season. I remember him saying this group of players is coming somewhat to the end of a cycle. Now, in that lineup last night, there were only 2 players who were signed over the summer, Kieran Tierney and Benjamin Nigren. Now, if he's saying a team's coming to the end of a cycle, I would expect there to be at least 4 or 5 new players in the team as the new season comes round, that's not been the case. So that's a big concern as well. But I'm sure there's more interesting comments from Rodgers that I think we can speak about as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go on to them. So it was the final two questions, really. I feel like I should read them out in full just to give the full context. So he was asked, just a final thought, does it feel a bit self-inflicted, the pressure put onto yourselves because of not replacing key players? It's very frustrating, says Brendan Rodgers. As I said, we all know where we want to get to. We showed last year, like I say, the strides that I felt we took, but you have to build on that. The last thing you want to do in football is manufacture your own stress. That's a big comment. That's what you don't want to be doing. But I think all we can do now is we have to look at where we're at as a football club and, like I say, decide what way we want to go. And at this moment in time, we can still have a very good season. The Europa League, some will say we deserve to be in that this year, but for me, go away with this group of players, see what the remaining days in the window bring, and then we've got a really big game out the weekend. And the final question, yes, given the financial gulf between the Europa League and the Champions League, does that impact at all on what you will do between now and the close of the window? Brendan Rodgers' response to that was, I haven't a clue, I really don't know. That's pretty concerning to me, Josh. I don't know about you, but that the fact that he doesn't know. Now, maybe he's given a completely different answer behind the scenes. Maybe he does know, and he doesn't want to give too much away to the media. But that is the message that he's conveying to the journalists and reporters present, and to the wider Celtic support. It doesn't fill you with much confidence, does it?
Yeah, I don't think Brendan Rodgers would lie in the media after a result like that. He certainly give his honest answers, and that's probably definitely an honest answer there that he doesn't know, and that is hugely concerning. That's not how a modern football club operates, a world-class football club operates. That's the phrase Michael Nicholson likes to use. Modern football clubs and the big football clubs that are successful in Europe and successful domestically will have strategies in place, and they know what happens. If Celtic qualify, or if their team qualify for the Champions League, they'll have their list of targets. They'll know what they want to do. Or they'll probably have them in the door before the qualifier, actually. And then they'll also know what's going to happen. If they don't qualify, if they're going to be in the Europa League, it would appear that that's not the case with Celtic, given the manager doesn't even know what's going to happen. So we can, I think, Marcelo Sarachi and Michelangelo Balikwisha's arrivals are impending. But after that, your guess and everyone in the comments' guess is as good as Brendan Rodgers' guess for what's going to happen between now and the end of the transfer window, because he doesn't even know. And that is, it's just so concerning. It just shows you and tells you everything about how Celtic's been run at the minute. And I put a quote on Twitter last night
from before we came on.
Dermot Desmond, and he said, I'd like to be able to say that in 5 years' time, this was in 2020, so it is 5 years on, that our team is better than any of the great teams that were led by Martin O'Neill, Gordon Strachan, Brendan Rodgers and Neil Lennon. Past half decade, 5 years have passed since, and Celtic have probably worse now than any of those sides. So, and I don't think he's done much to match his ambition.
Yeah, I think the 2020-21 team could have given that Celtic team a game last night. Well, you look at some of the players that were in that team, it was a dreadful season, but individually, you'd say that in a lot of the positions, Celtic were better than what they are now. Despite the disappointments they had that season, both in the Champions League and in the Europa League as well. Yeah, it's we've spoke about those two players that are incoming. It looks as if Michelangelo Balikwisha and Marcelo Sarachi from Royal Antwerp and Boca Juniors respectively are coming to the club in the coming days. Could even be announced today, which I fear for the response that will give. That those announcements will have on social media, because I think, and I mentioned it last night on the post-match show, I think there'll be a natural backlash. There'll be people saying, why weren't they signed earlier on? Why weren't they signed for the qualifier that was so important? I would also put an asterisk next to medicals, because you're pending a medical for players to actually get through medicals, and there was reports that Celtic were a little bit concerned about Balikwisha in particular going through a medical. So I think we'll wait with bated breath until he gets through that medical before signing for the club. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Not that I think anybody will be anyway. But those two players look set to be announced in the coming days, pending a medical. Josh, good signings, if a little bit late in the day to sign them.
Yeah, too little, too late could certainly be the argument you're making with Celtic and any signings they make between now and the end of the window. Balikwisha, his injury record is pretty poor, to be honest with you. But he looks like he has a bit of quality. You know, he's got experience in the Champions League. Not that that'll be much use now. It looks like he can score goals, he can assist. So yeah, I'll reserve my judgment on him, particularly wingers. I think it's difficult to see how they do until they get in the door. You know, Celtic dominate a lot of the ball. We've seen people like Luis Palma, Marco Tallio, who look good at their other clubs. They've come in and they're no longer even at Celtic. So just need to wait and see how Balikwisha gets on. When you see Sriracha, I think is a sensible signing. You know, you bring him in on a 1 year loan deal. The manager's probably not going to be here this time next year. So get him in. He's a quality player who's going to be back up to Kieran Tierney for the next 12 months. So yeah, I have no concerns about bringing him in. A Uruguay international, got experience at a lot of big clubs, so he'll know the pressure coming in to play for Celtic, and he'll be getting a lot of games as well. So I think that's a very sensible one. Balikwisha, I think I'll be reserving my judgment until I see him in action, and I think the best thing you could do with Michelangelo Balikwisha is start him on Sunday at Ibrox.
I would completely agree with that. He'd be one of the first names on the team sheet if and when he signs for the club, just to give the team a bit of a boost in terms of a new addition to the squad, without any pressure. I know there would be pressure on him playing in the Glasgow Derby in his first game, but what a baptism of fire that could be for him to really announce himself as a Celtic player. And let's be honest, Celtic's wing options aren't that great anyway at the moment, so you know it would already be an improvement in those areas. You mentioned there a wee comment that you made there, and I've got to say I agree with you. You said the manager won't be here next season. It was a question that I was asking quite a few Celtic fans ahead of the Livingston game about if Brendan Rodgers would be there after the end of his 3-year deal. I've got to be honest, and this is just my personal opinion, I think that Celtic will be looking for a new manager next season. I think there'll be a natural cutting of the ties between both sides, and Celtic will be looking for a new man to lead their team next season. And with the situation that the manager's working under with transfers, I just don't see him signing an extension. Is that your sort of view as well of his situation?
Yeah, I would agree. I think if you asked me this question in February, after the narrow defeat to Bayern Munich in the Champions League at the Allianz Arena, I think I would probably hit you with a different answer, because I look at that night. I remember watching Brendan Rodgers, his mannerisms, his post-match interviews that night. Although Celtic were knocked out by a last-minute goal, he was very enthused. He was very excited. He was a bit hyper in the sense that he was just so excited that Celtic were competing at that level and running Bayern Munich right to the death in their own backyard. And I look at his post-match press conference last night, and the change in tone, the change in mood,
the body language as well.
Yeah, he just looks like a deflated man, a man who's serving the end of a prison sentence, even in a way. It's just the change in mood from him. It's so concerning, and I think it just tells me he's not going to be here come the end of the season, because he said that he can't go back on his word now that he's going to be 150% here. So he has to stay this campaign and serve it out. But just on a whole, going from running Bayern Munich in their own backyard in February to whatever that was last night is just it's unforgivable in several aspects.
Do you think that those comments have come back to haunt him a little bit because of the mood music that's going about at the moment with Celtic? Now, I'm not for one second saying that Brendan Rodgers should leave his post immediately and resign or be sacked or anything like that. I wouldn't do that. He's been a successful manager, one of Celtic's most successful modern day managers in their history. But do you think those comments, now Celtic are stuck between a rock and a hard place in terms of they know that that Brendan Rodgers' contract is up at the end of the season. Brendan Rodgers has said that he'll serve his 3 years, so that's absolutely fine. But there's maybe a sort of acceptance in the air as well that he won't stay beyond that now. Either that or that's the way that it currently feels like. That's what the mood music feels like. It's a bit of a tricky situation, isn't it, for Brendan Rodgers and the club? And the last thing that you want Celtic to be doing this season is going through the motions and what is still a very important season in all competitions for the club.
Yeah, and I think the manager essentially said it, didn't he? Just before, I think it was his press conference ahead of Flag Day, where he said that if you back me and if you provide me the quality players I need, I will stay. It's not really happened, has it? And I just think, the whole mood music around it, I don't think I would speak to one Celtic fan in the next week that says Brendan Rodgers is going to stay now. He probably knows as well. We've had this conversation a number of times over the past couple of months in terms of, I don't even think Brendan Rodgers knows what he wants to do. I think the nail is in the coffin now that Brendan Rodgers will be out the door at the end of the season. But like he said last night after the game, can still have a positive season. Celtic can still have a really good season. They've got 3 domestic trophies that they could win. They could get a deep run in the Europa League, but the way this season has begun is just far from ideal, and it's all due to a lack of preparation, a lack of strategy, and a lack of quality on the park. And they've got a couple of days now in the transfer window to sort it. And they'll get 2 signings in. But I think some things as well on the park do need to change a wee bit. I mean, if you're telling me that Michelangelo Balikwisha one signing is going to come in and change the whole energy of the way that team played last night, you'd be completely wrong. So some things on the pitch and the way the team play need to alter too. Because the past couple of games, even the games that I feel Celtic have won this season, St Mirren at home on Flag Day, performance wasn't great then. I don't think you can really speak about the Livingston game because there were a number of changes to the team, but just a couple of performances, they've just not been there in the energy in the team. They've been somewhat of a continuation from some of the performances we've seen at the end of last season, and that's been a wee bit of a concern as well.
Yeah, just playing devil's advocate for a minute. Josh, do you think that off the back of this Champions League result that you could potentially see outgoings to maybe some of the players that you've maybe not been speaking about leaving the club because of the lack of Champions League football? Or do you think that won't make a massive impact on their respective futures? And if so, would you name any?
I think the name everyone is talking about, to be honest, in terms of a departure is Daizen Maeda. I think if a Champions League comes in for Daizen Maeda and offers a fee that Celtic will take, he will go. And Celtic probably won't replace him because they've not replaced Nicholas Kuhn, they've not replaced Kyogo Furuhashi. So I wouldn't be surprised, put it this way, between now and Monday, if an offer comes in for Daizen Maeda from a Champions League club and he does go. And I also wouldn't be surprised if Celtic don't replace him in the process. That's the way the club is run. Unfortunately, at the minute there's a lack of strategy. So
that happened in the past, didn't it? Players left the club off the back of the Champions League exit to sort of cover that cost or cover that financial loss. There was those famous quotes that Peter Lawwell came out with. We're keeping money for a rainy day in case Celtic don't qualify for the Champions League. Well, it looks as if one of these plans will have to come into action this season because that is the case. Just in terms of the transfer window, Celtic have got 3-4 days left to make some signings. It looks as if 2 will come in, as we spoke about with Balikwisha and Sirachi. Where else do they need to strengthen, Josh? Not the easiest question. Where do they not need to strengthen? Would maybe be the better question. But yeah, where do they? And do you think that? No, I don't think this will happen for a second. But do you think that Celtic still need to spend Champions League levels of money in order to actually improve the squad to where it needs to be for European competition, even though they're not going to be in the Champions League this season? Maybe that'll be an excuse as to why they don't spend the big bucks.
Yeah, I think that will be the excuse that's brought out. But I mean, I look at the team that played last night and the way the team performed last night, and the subs that even come on as well. And I look at some of the teams that are in the Europa League and that Celtic could face. I'm not even confident in that team last night. I mean, that team last night can't even beat Kairat Almaty over 2 legs. So I'm not entirely confident that they go into the Champions League and play the likes of Porto, Braga, Nottingham Forest and teams like that and do well. So you do need to strengthen them. Obviously, 2 players can make a difference, but they're not going to make a massive difference, and that's why you need more additions. I think the front line, I mean, when James Forrest and Yang Hyun-jun are your 2 first choice wingers at the minute, you need at least 2 wingers in the club. They're going to get 1 in Balikwisha. They certainly need another one, preferably a right-sided one. I think you need a striker as well. Although Adamida was okay last night, you need someone with a bit more quality at the top end of the park, because if that chance that Daizen Maeda had, I don't think there are many other players. I don't think there's any player in the team maybe that you would feel fully confident in scoring that chance. There is no player in the team.
Not at the moment, no.
No, and that's a massive concern. And that tells you need quality additions at the top end of the park. So once you get Ballachush in, you need another winger, and I think you could do with a number 9 as well. The club aren't going to sign a right back if they qualify for the Champions League. That might have been something that happened, but they're not going to sign one now. It'll be Anthony Ralston and, like say, young Kobe Donovan getting that opportunity.
Sriracha can play on the right as well. He's played there.
Sriracha, exactly. So you've got that. I think the midfield is pretty stacked. And if Daisen Maeda departs, do you need a replacement? But are they going to get a replacement? Probably not, because they've not even replaced Kuhn and Kyogo.
Yeah, that's where we're at the moment. Wow, we've managed to fill another half an hour with talking about largely the same things as last night, but the good thing is we had Brendan Rodgers' comments to touch upon today. Josh, thank you so much as always for coming on and enjoying week 2 of this Celtic Way therapy session post Champions League game. We had one last week at home. We thought that it couldn't get any worse, but I think last night it did get worse. But we thank each and every one of you guys for coming on into the comment section. Sorry for not bringing up any of the comments. I just wanted to get the Brendan Rodgers quotes in there, talk about the transfers, talk about all the negatives of last night. We'll try and bring in some more comments in the shows later on this week. It's a big week still for Celtic. Celtic have got the Glasgow derby on Sunday against Rangers. They'll need to up themselves for that game at Ibrox on Sunday. Yeah, and it'll be all focus on that, as well as the transfer window from now until the 1st of September and just before. Thank you to each and every one of you for joining us. Thank you, Josh, for coming on this morning. And we'll see you all tomorrow, same time, same place. Cheers, guys.